Good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the back row from What I Watched Tonight. My name is Matt Hudson, and this is the Retrospective series where I talk about a film which is bloody good with somebody else who seems to think that film was bloody good as well. And tonight, I'm very pleased to say, I think this is the first time on this particular show, but I'm joined by a Welshman with a penchant for leaks, but not those kind of leaks. I'm joined by Bespin Bulletin. How are you, my friend?
Good, man. How are you?
I am very well, very well. For those who don't know, Bespin's my buddy. He's been on the sessions a few times to talk Star Wars leaks, and we get up on the headset on the PlayStation. We play some Warzone along with Ant the Stud from Moving Picture Madness, and so we talk a lot off air. And I thought it was high time that he came on to speak about a certain film tonight. But before we get into all that, Bespin, I've just mentioned you like a leak. You may want to clarify that for our listeners.
Yeah, so I'm Bespin Bulletin, and a few years ago I started some social media pages that gathered a bunch of Star Wars news from reliable sources and put them in one place, just so fans wouldn't get misled. That eventually led to me getting sources of my own at Pinewood Studios in England, and I got like a lot of details on some Star Wars movies. And ever since, I've been dropping, as Matt said, little leaks now and again, and built up a little bit of a name in the Star Wars leaking community. You may have seen the name passed around, probably not, but you might have seen one of our stories. And yeah, like that's what I do on the day-to-day. I also have a podcast called Bob the Podcast, where we just chat about all things pop culture. And yeah, I've known Matt for quite some time now, and we've been talking about this for quite a while. It was more so trying to pick the right film. But I think we've picked a belter of a film today.
God, mate. Also, Bespin's being slightly modest there when he says he's got a few leaks. Bespin managed to basically find out the entirety of Trolls about before the writers even knew about it. And he was recently mentioned in things like IGN and things like that as well. So you in anything you hear from the pen or the social media account of Bespin Bulletin, which we will give at the end, you can take it to the bank. Put it like that. Not like some of the other more shady, nefarious Star Wars leakers out there. Bespin's the real deal. But yeah, we went back and forward about which film to watch and speak about on Retrospectives tonight. But we have finally settled on one. And look, this film will be up against most films. Will probably come out on top. And it's 2011's Drive. And before we talk about it in depth, here is the admin as usual. It's directed by Nicolas Winding Road. Nicolas Winding Refn. It stars Ryan Gosling, Kerry Mulligan, Bryan Cranston, Christina Hendricks, Ron Perlman, Oscar Isaac and Albert Brooks. Made for $15 million and it made $81.4 million back. It didn't win any Oscars, but it was nominated for Best Sound Editing, and Refn did win the Best Director Award at the Cannes Film Festival that year. And what's it about? In short, a stuntman and a getaway driver falls in love with Irene. It's really specific, but falls in love with Irene, who is married to a criminal. In a bid to protect her from her husband and some gangsters, he decides to cross over to the other side of the law. If you haven't seen this film, we're going to go into massive, massive spoilers. So this is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Drive from 2011, this is your spoiler warning. Also, that synopsis was all... I didn't write it, but that was terrible. That did not sell this film whatsoever. But so let's kick it off with the first question we need to know is, this film's been out for 10 years, but when did you first see it, mate?
I first saw this movie about a year after it released. There was this girl in the study room who I was trying to, woo, let's put it. And she told me Drive is her favourite movie. So I went home and I put it on and I watched it and I fell in love with it.
You watched it for love or other thoughts?
Yeah, I watched it just to get to know this girl and see where it could go. But yeah, I watched it and I fell in love with it. And yeah, the rest of that week was me gushing to this girl about the movie and Gosling. And yeah, I think I watched this movie every single year.
All she wanted was a date, and she's like, "Stop talking about the damn film, mate."
Yeah, I fell in love with Gosling instantly. I think this sounds weird, but I think this was the first movie I saw Ryan Gosling in.
Oh yeah.
And what a way to be introduced to this fine specimen of a man, you know?
I mean, in the What I Watched Tonight world, we know Ant, my co-host on NPM, and your friend as the stud, but Ryan Gosling may be his equal. I'm not sure, but he may be. No, mate, at least you're honest with your story. I watched the film to try and woo a girl. Sweet. And it turned out that 9 years later, here you are talking to a 30-something bloke about it. So I think it turned out right in the end.
Perfectly. Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, what were your initial thoughts? But you completely gushed about it. But when you saw it then, and I know you've watched it recently for the show, have your thoughts changed at all? And I don't mean do you think the film's better, but do you get a better appreciation for anything, or do things jump out still now, or is it just I just love this damn film?
This movie it hits me every time I watch it. Like I said, I watch it every single year without fail, and yeah, everything hits me. Like the music, I listen to the music so much. One of the first things I did when I got my driver's license and a car was just drive around the streets at 2 a.m. listening to the soundtrack of this film. It's the perfect soundtrack to drive around to. It's beautiful. And yeah, every time I watch this film, I just appreciate everything about it. Nothing ever gets tiresome for me. I adore this film.
No, well, you're right. Well, we're definitely going to talk about that soundtrack throughout this course of this show, because I've got thoughts on it as well, mate, and you know what they are. But no, I watched this about 7 years ago now, and the first time I saw it, I remember thinking, this is alright, I like it. But it wasn't until subsequent viewings where I was like, this is great. And then more and more so I was like, this is amazing. And then when I watched it the other night in preparation for this, I was just like, do you know when you're just like glued? Absolutely glued. Where everything falls into place. Like I said, the music, the acting, or like the performances, the locations. Yeah, the techniques Refn uses, the camera technique, just everything just falls into place, mate. You're like, Jesus Christ, this is incredible. This is incredible. And that pretty much sets up what Retrospectives is all about. We just sit here and gush about the film. And if there is anything that which we thought wasn't quite up to par, we will mention that at the end. If there isn't, no worries. Some people don't have any issues. But let's do it, mate. Let's just get into the film. What the top level, what is like that one moment you think of when you think of Drive?
The first scene that always comes to mind is when the driver takes Irene and Benicio on a little drive. When a real hero starts playing and the sun is blaring, it's just a beautiful moment. And I get chilled every time I watch that scene.
I've got that down as a note as well, Max. I couldn't remember what it's because it's been used in a few films out, but I can't for the life of me remember what the location's called. I've got that as well. But it's just the way that it's that famous like gorge place. The music is wonderful, and you're kind of thinking where are they going with this, because he's just driving them down, and it's idyllic enough. And then they find that kind of like hidden paradise, the river, like in the background, and there's no words. As is the beauty of this film, it's done in performance and subtlety rather than the actors sitting there telling you what you should be thinking in this moment. That is a perfect example, because all you need to see is the driver, who at first seems quite uptight and quite introverted, letting his guard down, throwing rocks into the river, having them skip across the river. He's loosening up. Yeah. But I don't need him to tell me that. I need the performances, I need the location, and just the way they look at each other. That's all I need, and it's so well done, isn't it?
It is. When you see the driver carrying Benicio, who's sleeping in his arms, and Irene's just watching him walk up the corridor, you can see these two characters falling in love with each other. And it's a massive contrast to the scenes earlier in the movie with the driver, where he's bathed in the nighttime. He's usually alone. There's such a big contrast to that. He's finally finding, the song that says it is a real hero, a real human being. He's finding that thing that'll make him human. Because this, like you said, this guy doesn't really behave like a normal human being. He doesn't say a lot. And honestly, quite a few of his mannerisms are quite childlike. But this is the moment where he wants to be a better person.
Yep.
He wants this life, and that's amazing.
And it's and Carey Mulligan, I know she's getting a lot of praise for Promising Young Woman, a film which we both thought was incredible.
Yeah, I adore it.
It's so good, and she is also so good in this as well. She isn't just some like damsel in distress kind of cat, or just some like woman flouncing about or anything like that. She's her own character, and when we find out what she's been through, and in her since she met Oscar Isaac's character, Standard, what she's been through and what she's had to do by herself, it's it adds more weight to her character, because I can see a lot of people watching this film thinking, well, the driver doesn't say anything, so he's got no development. She's got no development. She just smiles a lot. But it's not like that at all. And I think Refn has managed to direct the hell out of this effort in order to elicit those performances, but make us as the viewer realise that there's more to this than just meets the eye. There are layers to these performances, and the moment actually after that when they're driving and the driver's obviously he's got his hand on the gear stick and it's all very silent, it's all very subtle, and it's just this beautiful like tension, like sexual tension as well. But when she just slowly puts her hand on his, but that's it. The camera just lingers on their hands together on the gear stick, and then that's it again. There's no words, no nothing, but it's kind of like silence is what makes this film so perfect. And it's those moments where their relationship is built on those moments, and it's one of my favourite relationships in film because it just feels so. Something feels really pure about it in those moments.
Pure was going to be my word for it. It all just feels so natural.
It's mine now.
Yeah, it just feels so natural. Like from the minute the driver sets eyes on Irene, you can tell he's infatuated with this woman. There's one shot in particular where he's in his apartment, just staring out the window, and you can see Irene and Benicio, her child, in the distance. It doesn't go do a close up of them. It's just far enough away that you know it's them. And he's just watching. Yeah. And yeah, that's just an incredible shot because that's what he's longing for.
Yep.
And we see that throughout the entire film. The rest of the film is basically him trying to protect the woman he's fallen in love with, which is beautiful.
No, and again, you could overlook that a lot if you don't look further into the film. We could just ignore those subtleties, especially that one you just mentioned. And it's when, their first meeting, I've got on a note here, I've got this one in a different colour to make sure I mentioned it, but imagine shopping at the Big Six market and seeing that stud strolling down the aisle in that denim shirt. Can you imagine? I mean, now I know what the people of Wales feel like when they see you in the supermarket, but imagine that. But they're meeting before that, they walk past each other in the car park, and then he sees her in the supermarket or the grocery store, whatever, and it's just like, again, it's the silence of the meeting. And then when it Shannon's workshop, Bryan Cranston's workshop, it obviously then it expands from there. But it's just one of the best romances in film with so little dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think we got to credit the score for that because, like, the music plays a massive part of this movie and a massive part of the relationship of the driver and Irene. One of the best examples for me is when Standard returns home from prison. He's having a welcome home party being thrown for him by Irene. You see a room full of people, his family and friends, whilst the song Andy a Spell plays. And it pans to her and it cuts to Gosling on his own in an empty apartment. And it's just you can hear it blaring through the walls. And it's just that's all they're thinking about. They're just thinking about one another. And Gosling exits the room, and she's outside, and she apologizes for the music, and he says, "I should call the cops." And she says, "Yeah, you should." And I'm like, "Yes, somebody call the cops. Get Standard out of here. Let them be together, please."
Yeah, that's it. Oh wait, I love that scene. It's she's looking, and then it cuts to him looking. It's that kind. It's almost like a telepathic bloody love. It's. Yeah. I'm smiling because it's just so well done. But it's not even like a showy trick.
No,
it's so simple to think about it. But when you get it done right, they're in different apartments, and you've got Poe Dameron giving his speech. And he's like, I've had Irene waiting for me, but she's elsewhere, man. She's thinking about the driver. And I mean, to be caught between Oscar Isaac and Ryan Gosling ain't a bad thing to be caught between.
It isn't, man. It's a great place to be caught between.
No, exactly.
But that whole sequence is amazing. And yeah, like at that point, you just internally screaming, "Just be with each other! Just be with each other!" Yeah, man. This film is phenomenal.
You mentioned let's just, rather than beating around the old foliage, let's talk about the score, because otherwise we're going to be sitting there saying, "Well, the music's quite good," but we'll talk about. Okay, this is getting to it, man, because I know how much. Well, you've mentioned you go cruising the streets at 2 a.m. listening to this, and I was listening to the tunes. I've been as I've been saying to yourself, and I've been having it on just non-stop And I looked on YouTube as well. I had your playlist on there, and some of the comments on there are, I mean, you probably noticed, but they're dead on. One of them was just like, you cannot listen to this during the day. You have to listen to this in the evening, especially in your car. And I was like, you know what? When I get the chance, when I have a free evening, I am going to get in the car. I'm going to cruise Essex, and I'm just going to listen. I'm just going to listen to that and just get blown away, because there is something euphoric. There's something cathartic about that music, and I don't quite know what it is, but there's something. It's something in that. That music has a soul of some sort. But I don't know if anyone can explain what's so special about it. But I'm going to throw over to you, mate, to try and explain what is so special about this soundtrack, man, and score.
The soundtrack is quite euphoric in some ways. A Real Hero, Nightcall, Under Your Spell, especially being the key standouts for me. And the thing is, the movie was almost based around the music. When Wind and Refn met with Gosling, they didn't hit it off at first. And it was on the drive home where the two of them played cheesy pop music and sang in the car together. And once that trip was done, Refn turned to Gosling and said, "This is the movie. It's about a guy driving around the streets of LA listening to pop music." So that is drive. That is what helped to make this movie the masterpiece that I consider it to be. And if Refn and Gosling believe that comes across on the screen. And yeah, like, it's just the music. Like, I don't know, I listen to all different types of music, but it's something about the synth pop and the electronic waves that just, I don't know, man, it just captures you.
See, it's so hard to quantify exactly what it is.
Yeah, it's honestly, there's not many films that leave me speechless due to the score, but this is one of them. This is just an instant snap of the fingers and it's got you. Yeah,
mate. The opening. This is related to the music. The opening scene itself, which we'll mention, but the music in that's incredible. When Nightcall accompanies the opening credits so damn well. Like, there was I've very rarely like fist pumped and gone yes at a moment in a score, other than maybe John Williams or the Hobbit's theme in the Lord of the Rings, but. When there's just a little moment when Ryan Gosling, the driver, exits his apartment and he turns the light off, and it's in time with the beat, and the next scene immediately in time with the beat transitions to a shot of the city and him driving, and it was so fucking well done that I literally was yes, like, that is incredible. Just the way that because it infuriates me sometimes when directors don't time their scenes or sequences to the beat of the music if it seems intentional that they should do. They do it so perfectly in this, where the scenes just match the music, and the scenes complement each other so well, and the fact that they are synced up like that, honestly, mate. And I mean, the opening credits, I mean, they're iconic almost. The kind of baby bright pink, neon pink writing. I got a lot of Live and Die in LA vibes from that, from the film in itself, the Billy Friedkin film, which we might mention Billy Friedkin later on. But just the music, the font and the aesthetic, the LA at night, the kind of grubbiness of it, the movie star good looks of this mysterious driver, and just everything. Oh, mate.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like a melting pot of so many things.
It's like right now my room is bathed in pink neon light
Yes.
After watching it again. And yes, because of the font. I think the font is quite iconic for this movie. And I think what adds to the big yes moment when Nightcall starts to play is the opening sequence of this film is really tense quality sequence, and you're on a knife edge the entire time. So when the music hits and the credit and the opening titles appear, it is that euphoric moment. It is, yes, he's got away with it, even though you don't know anything about this guy yet. You're instantly hooked and want to know more about him. And the music hits, and you put into this world. Like, it's bright lights. It's the dark city. It's the pink font. It's the music. All of it encapsulates what this movie is.
Yep.
And man, It's just, I love this film.
I've forgotten the intensity of that opening shot, the getaway, when it just you got the driver, he's on the phone, and like you've got a 5-minute window, and he's laying down the law, and like, okay, well this guy, he knows what he's doing, he's in control of the situation. Then the music starts but there's silence the whole way through. I mean, it barely says anything, and of course that sets up the tone for the film. The car chase I thought was great. I love the way the car chase is done. I love the way it's executed as well, so tightly shot, just to really ramp up the tension even more. And the Clippers, the LA Clippers. I noticed this, and I've heard other people talking about it. But you see the Clippers game on his television to start with. You think, why are they zooming into the basketball game? What's that got to do with anything? Yeah. And at the end of the getaway, obviously he gets there, and he's got it on the radio, and he gets to the LA, whatever it's called, LA Clippers Center, the convention center, and just as the game's finishing, so he can mingle in with the crowd with his little cap on, and just little detail. And there's so many little details throughout the film, so many little moments which connect or which lead to bigger things, like the whole scorpion analogy, which we find out later on as well. There's so much in this film which just works, and that's why the synopsis doesn't do it right. A stuntman falls in love with a woman who's married to a criminal. In a bid to protect her from the gangsters, he crosses the other side of the law. That to me sounds a bit schlocky, a bit naff, doesn't it?
That also reminds me of the marketing of this movie, where the trailers, I think, painted it out to be like this almost Fast and Furious type of action film. And I remember people, they went to see it, and it has like a 90-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the cinema score was a C-. And one woman even tried to sue them because it wasn't the
Karen?
film. It might have been a Karen, but it wasn't the film that was marketed. And yeah, like I said, I knew nothing about this film going into it. And going back and seeing the trailers, it isn't the movie I want to see. It isn't the movie we've watched. And I can understand why somebody did try and sue them. But I'm so glad that it wasn't like a cheap Fast and Furious knockoff. Instead, it is...
You mate.
Instead, it's this beautiful little small film which is a love story. It's not an action film. It's a love story and a deep dive into this messed up man's brain. And it's just, it's so much better than an action movie. And I think Gosling, he has an eye for good films. I enjoy most of the projects he's been involved with, but Drive will always be supreme. Drive will always be my favorite Gosling project, and Refn's.
Yeah, no, Refn's done some interesting films, and Gosling, like you say, he's very hands-on with I think he's a producer on this film. We certainly had a lot of sway on it. So he's always, he knows what he wants from his films, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like an actor who is so into his craft that he wants to have not full control, because I don't think that's healthy, but to have a say in where he wants the role and the film to go. Firstly, because nobody wants to star in a dud, but creatively, he wants to have a legacy, and he wants to have something to interest him for the months that he's working on it. So, and he's a fantastic actor as well. He really is a fantastic actor, and I know a lot of people say, well, in films like this and First Man and that, we don't really say he's non-responsive, he's not emotive, but that's what the role calls for. Watch this and then watch The Nice Guys, or watch First Man and 2 films by the same geezer, but then go and watch La La Land. I mean, there are different roles, and then The Notebook, and then Place Beyond the Pale. Everything's different. He's got that brooding quality. He's got that movie star quality to him. But he's also and he's a very good actor. And I think now people realise that. But before, I think he was kind of cast off a little bit because he happened to be a good-looking fella. That kind of how Brad Pitt was to start with. Like, he's a good-looking guy, and he only stars in these films, and can he actually really act? But no, he really can. And the Driver is a way of showing that, because again, that could have come off as cardboard and vanilla, but he imbues it with so much. And there's a few scenes I'm going to mention shortly in a bit which really, really cemented. One in particular where I was just like, damn, he's nailed that. But I wanted to ask you about the Driver himself. Is that we see his arc during a film where we assume to start with he's just a driver. He's not in it to get his hands dirty. He's a driver in and out. But by the end of the film, obviously, he has become something else. But so the question is, was he ticked off by the threat to the boy? So when Irene's son is threatened with the bullet, is that when he switches, or do you think he's always been like? Has he always had his impulses? Is he just a sociopath, really? But he's just been very good at hiding it.
I think it's both. This thread will take us to the scorpion analogy. But yeah, I think he's always been this way. He's always had these instincts. He's always been. Well, he's not a great guy. He's helping people rob certain stores. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty in the underground world. And yeah, I think he wants to be a different person when he meets Irene and Benicio. Even when he takes the job to help Standard, he doesn't want payment. He just wants Irene and Benicio to be left alone. Even if that means he's not with them. And obviously by the end of the movie, again, he makes that choice again to help save them and not to be with her. It's just, yeah, and that's how I think he operates in this movie. I think it's a bit of both. And, there's a moment where he calls Albert Brooks and he says, do you ever hear the story of the scorpion and the frog? And obviously, I think one of the most iconic things about this movie is his jacket, the scorpion jacket. And I think that is his character. He is the scorpion. He has instincts that he can't control. And
I'm not going to lie, as soon as I watched this film, I went online to see if I could pick that jacket up. And you can get a version which looks pretty sweet. 50 quid on Amazon. I don't want to wear it, I just want to hang it up. Because I could never pull that off.
Yeah.
Because it's so... That analogy, yeah, you're right, mate. That leads into bigger things.
Yeah, and there's this one moment. It's the moment people say is too violent. Where he destroys a man's head in an elevator, and
I've been there.
We've all been there. And he pans around and looks at Irene, and once the elevator doors close, we get this shot on the jacket on the scorpion.
Yeah,
the scorpion has just killed the frog.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. And yeah, you can explain this type of stuff better than me, Matt. So the floor is yours.
Well, that moment was actually the one I was saying when I was like, God damn. When he stamps that guy's head in, and then he kind of he just turns it's the way he turns to look at Irene.
It's like a scared child that just got caught doing something naughty.
There's that, and he just looks like he's crossed it. His soul has left his body at that moment. He is now no longer that guy. He's gone. His eyes are just completely hollowed out. The way his mouth is as well. It's just, I just absolutely love that. Because when I was watching it yesterday, I was like, this is terrifying. The guy looks like an absolute psychopath in that moment. And that's more than just performing. I'm not saying Ryan Gosling is a guy who's going to cave your skull in, but that's somebody who knows what he wants. That's not just anyone phoning a performance in. Do you know what I mean? I was genuinely in that moment itself was shocking. But yeah, with the analogy, the scorpion itself is shown a few times during the film, and far from it just being a cool jacket, it is the resonance, how much it means to this film is unreal. And like they say, when in the analogy, why did the scorpion jumps on the frog's back? Take me across the ocean. I won't sting you because if I do, we'll both drown.
Yeah.
Halfway across, the scorpion stings the frog. Why? Because it is in my nature.
Yeah.
And that's what, as you've just said, that is the driver. He wears this scorpion emblem on his back because it's in his nature. Yeah. It's in his nature. He might not want to do it, but that's just who he is. And this guy was unfortunate. Well, good for us, but he was on the receiving end. And then we saw the real, what was bubbling underneath the surface of this once kind of mysterious guy was actually something a lot more menacing. And the scene. I love the moment before when he just sort of very lightly pushes Irene back. I was like, what a gentleman. And then of course the lights dim and they have the kiss. Did that happen? Was that all in his mind, or did that really happen, do you think?
I think it happened. I think that was his goodbye.
I think it did as well. But then going back to rewatch it a few times, the reason why I think it happened was because when they turn to fight each other, he literally does turn away from her to fight, to punch him. Yeah, so it's not like he was standing next to him. But I was just interested in your thoughts, because when the lights dimmed, and I know it's done for dramatic effect, but I was also thinking, is this like a dream sequence type thing, and then he's going to come to and just beat the living shit out of this guy?
Yeah, I think it's sort of, it obviously happens, but I think this is how he's picturing it in his mind, where there's nobody else in the elevator but him and Irene. This looming threat isn't there. So once he's out of that moment, it's back to the action. She's going to see me for who I am, and she's not going to want to be with me, but I've got to do it to protect her.
She's gone from his life for that. When those doors close, it's that symbolic moment that we see a lot in films, but it's so powerful here because of just the way she is, the way that in that moment she realizes it too, and she's scared, she's frightened, and he is just gone. And the way the doors close and it closes, it zooms in on that scorpion is just wonderful.
There's little like subtle hints at his unraveling on the build up to this. His hair is usually perfect. His collar is always upright on his scorpion jacket. And once he knocks on Irene's door, when he's going to walk her to the elevator, his collar is crooked and his hair is disheveled. This is him descending into...
That's a good point.
Mayhem. And I don't think that's a mistake. I think that is purposely done by Refn. Because he's so particular with this movie. That is not just something that the wardrobe just didn't fix. That is there to show you that this man is unraveling.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it as well. The spiral is happening, the unraveling is happening, and it's that moment, and it's all leading up to that moment, and kind of you get the glimpses when Standers had the shit kicked out of him in the car park, and Benicio's got the bullet. And again, he's looking at it, and you can see the cogs turning. Like he knows what's got to happen now. He knows something's going to have to happen here, and it's not going to go. It's not going to go well. But it's you can say there are little moments throughout, and even before the elevator, we get the moment where where Poe. I couldn't want to believe Poe. On my notes, I've got him down as Poe, so I couldn't remember his name. Standard. He enlists Driver to help him out to basically clear some debts off. He needs to do a robbery, clear his debts off to these gangsters, which goes south. Sand ends up getting killed, and at that moment as well, you can just see it by Driver's face. He's like, "Fuck, none of this was not meant to happen." And even in that moment, when Driver was watching Standard getting shot down, even then I was like, "This doesn't look like a man who's in his element. This isn't his environment. He looks scared. He looks shocked that this could happen." And then he goes back into Driver mode. And then he starts beating Christine Hendricks because he knows that she's fucked him over, and now they're coming. And we get that moment in the bathroom, don't we, where the shotgun comes through the window, mate.
Yeah, it takes basically her head off. The Driver then has to fight for his life. And I think it's in this moment he realizes this is who he is.
Yep, that's it. Spot on.
Yeah, once he kills the guy with the shotgun who comes through the bathroom, and he's got the blood all over his face, and he uses the shotgun to kill the guy coming through the front door. I think that's when he realizes that this is who I am, this is the world that I live in. And that's when he makes the decision to go and see Irene and kiss her goodbye, because he cares about her too much to let her live in this world with him.
Mm-hmm. And he's seen firsthand what's going to happen. And as Albert Brooks later on says, you're going to be looking over your shoulder the whole time for the rest of your life. You're in the world now. You're not going to get out. And shout out as well to, Nemo's dad in this film. Albert Brooks is incredible. Albert Brooks is a fabulous actor anyway, but in this film, he's so well cast in this film. His voice, his mannerisms, his physical appearance as Bernie, he's brilliant. He's great, mate, and he feels menacing as well.
Yeah, and he also feels like he doesn't want to be this way, especially towards the Driver and Shannon.
Especially with Shannon,
he just wants to have his name in a car and reap the rewards. That's all he wants to do. And what I love is the story of how Albert Brooks got this role. He shaved his eyebrows and went and met Refn and pinned him up against walls and was threatening towards him on their first meeting.
Beat him up.
Yeah, that's how determined he was to get this role. Like, look, I am the guy. Like, fair play to him, because that took some balls to do that to the director. But yeah, I think even
it didn't work. He
just calls up the studio. Yeah, this guy's a fucking nut job. Like, get him out.
Me, Albert Brooks sentenced to 5 years in jail for beating director.
Yeah, like it's mad. It's such great casting, and I think obviously Ron Perlman as well cast as Nino.
Beast, isn't he?
He's a beast. Yeah, he's amazing. Like, Ron Perlman is always menacing as a villain. He always is.
And he could have also been over the top, but he isn't. He's just right, and he's a perfect foil for. Because Bernie is a bit more, like you say, he's more remorseful. He's calculating as well. He's more of a he seems more there in the head, whereas Nino is like a loose cannon. And we do get that wicked moment in the diner where they're talking together, and you find out that these bad guys, owe people money. They owe other people money themselves. So they're not these moustache twirling masterminds. They're not the be all and end all. They owe people money, so they're in the shtick as well. And I like that. And in that moment, we get a bit of humanity between them. And then Albert Brooks goes, "Shut the fuck up, you fucking monkey," and then stabs Cook in the eye with a fork and then through the neck. So the humanity side goes out the window, but we find out more about them, which we don't always do in films. Certainly ones like this, we're just usually told, look, these guys are the bad guys. They want their money, and if they don't get it, bang, bang. But we find out a little bit more about their motivation.
Even the introduction between the driver and Bernie is fantastic. The driver takes off his gloves and says, "My hands are a little dirty," and Bernie's like, "Yeah, so am mine." And they just shake hands, and it's like, right, yeah, this is going to be fun. Something's really going to happen here, because we already know that like Shannon is linked between these guys, and he's had a bad run-in with Nino before. He broke his pelvis because he owed him. Did he owe him money? I think he was overcharging them, wasn't he? He was overcharging them.
Yeah, he was messing about, and we know he's played the driver for fiddle by underpaying him basically for years. It's great, but then he overcharged the wrong people. Yeah,
and he's taken a bit out of the driver's earnings for all of his stunt work on the movies. He's probably taken a massive cut out of the racing they're hoping to do. But yeah, like, and even like when it comes to like the car stuff in this movie, like Gosling, to get into the mind of this role, he fixed up that car himself. Like his car that the driver uses through the film is something Gosling fixed up himself. And even the choices for like very little dialogue between the driver and Irene was something that Gosling, Refn, and Mulligan came up with together. Originally, they both had a lot more dialogue in the script, but
that's what I love about this collaborative effort, is that you get some directors who will say, "No, this is my way," and the screenwriter wrote this. This is my vision, and you get others. In this instance, Refn, who has brought his talent on board for a reason, because he wants to utilize their talent. These are two types of people. What do you see your characters being like? This is our driver. This is how he is. Would he really be that chatty with Irene, who in herself doesn't seem like the most outgoing, chatty person anyway, just by her purpose, because of what she's been through, probably. So it makes sense, and I just like the fact that they got them on board and allowed them to shape their characters, and look what he's got out of it.
And even Bryan Cranston, at this point, he was already in Breaking Bad, and Refn saw him in the first season and was like, "Yep, I need this guy in this movie." But he wasn't the star that he is now. Like, Breaking Bad in its early days wasn't massive. It wasn't until about his third or fourth season it really started to take off. But
he's good in most things, Bryan Cranston, anyway.
He was severely underrated, like, as an actor until Breaking Bad. And so he took the character of Shannon, and when he noticed that Gosling and Carey Mulligan, they were chopping down their dialogue, he ad-libbed most of his lines, because he wanted to make Shannon a chattier character because of what Gosling and Mulligan and Refn were doing to the other characters. He wanted to fill that void, and he brought his own personality and his own take to the script, and that works very well, because anytime he's involved, he's just a bit of a bumbling idiot, isn't he?
He is, and he ends up ballsing up towards the end.
Exactly.
Again, it's the director. The director has to say the final say in the end, but the fact that even when Cranston's like, "Well, why don't I make up for that and fill the void by talking a little bit more?" He's like, "Yeah, go for it. Ad lib, do what you want, mate."
Yeah,
and going with it, and I'm sure there are some kind of restrictions, but that is what sometimes a film needs. There are other films where you can't get away with that, where you can't just let the talent, however good they are, really, really, really like take control. You have to sometimes step back and be like, "This is the vision. This is what we're going to do." But then there's films like this where it just bloody works, mate. It just works, and nobody feels bigger than. That's what I mean. With Nino could have potentially felt bigger than the film, but he doesn't. He's just right. The driver could have felt, undercooked, but he isn't. Same as Irene, they could have felt like, they're a bit wasted, but they don't. Bryan Cranston, he's filled in the void, but even then, he's not too stupid. He's not too chatty. Like at the end, when Bernie slices his wrist down, even Bernie's like, "I'm sorry, mate, I didn't really want to have to do that," and he looks remorseful
he does
about it. the scene of him in his house afterwards, and there's little things like that. Rather than just having him be like, do that, slit his wrist, and then like slice his throat as well, just to show what a badass he is. He's like, they give the bad guys some humanity. Even in the end, Nino's like, fuck, I think I just even need to rather drown myself. Then he's scared. He's fearful at the end. He's not going out with like a final monologue or kind of like you'll never win drive or anything like that. No, he goes out like a punk.
Ocean, like he
knows what's coming.
Yeah, and this film feels very personal. That's how I look at it, and it obviously is. When Refn, he moved all the cast and the editing crew into a house together whilst they were filming this movie.
Yeah,
he wanted this to be a personal project, and one of the funniest stories from that time was Carey Mulligan was pulled over and for speeding in LA, and when the officers asked her, like, why was you speeding? She said, "Oh, I've had like 3 Red Bulls or something." It's so stupid, but a reference in the passenger seat with her, and this movie feels personal, and I love like hearing little stories like that from their time together making this movie. Because from the moment he first met Gosling up until the movie comes out, it feels personal. And I do wonder, because Hugh Jackman was first cast in the role of the driver, right? Like, what kind of movie would it have been with Wolverine in the role,
I mean, Hugh Jackman's been a great actor for a long time, and now Hugh Jackman's wonderful now. Hugh Jackman's a beefcake, and he's a great actor. And in Bad Education last year, it's one of my favourite performances of the year. I think he would have been great in this role, but same with any actor though, it becomes a different film.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You can put anyone in that role, and it changes the dynamic somewhat. That's why sometimes you get lightning in a bottle and it works. Sometimes it works, and in this instance, it worked. The combination of the talent, Refn's direction, and his approach, like you say, this collaborative approach, and the slightly kind of off the wall idea of moving everyone in together. I mean, in these COVID times, that sounds weird to even say that, but that kind of creating that spirit and that camaraderie and that bond, whilst also letting people kind of do what they want. And I wonder how much freedom the cinematographers had and the other people on set, if they could kind of chip in a little bit as well, as to give their stamp on it. Because by the sounds of it, it sounds like it's a very open set. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, it really does work. And personal is a good word, because the trailer made it out, like you say, to be this big bombastic action film, and it very well could have been that in the wrong hands. They could have made it more like Baby Driver, which I enjoyed a lot. But this could have been like Baby Driver, a good film in its own right, but it's not. It's its own little thing, and it's better for that reason.
Yeah, and I think early on with the development of this movie, this was supposed to be like a big budget action film before it was handed down to Refn, and it was made into a much smaller project. Like this, we could be having a completely different conversation right now about Drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this could have been a failed Fast and Furious clone,
Yeah, if it would have been worth having a conversation about. And you like the Fast and Furious films, but well, again, there's nothing wrong with that. We jest, but ain't nothing wrong with that.
They're just popcorn munching fun films, aren't they?
It could have been like that, and in this instance, I'm glad it's not. Hey, look, it could have been the best getaway popcorn munching flick of all time. We're never going to know, thankfully, because what we did get was something so different. And the moments when it does go action, it's kind of restrained, but it is. Like we mentioned, the elevator scene. That's just that's a release. That's an explosion. Before that, we get Christina Hendricks' head getting blown off, and then Ryan Gosling shoots the other guy, and he stabs him in the neck, shoots the other guy. But then we have the scenes where he's taking in what's going on. He's kind of he's realised, right, well, this is, like you mentioned, this is it now. This is nothing. There's no going back from this. And he goes immediately after Cook, who's fucked him off in the start of the film. He bashes him with a hammer. He's going to hammer a bullet into his head, and instead starts choking him with it. The action and violence is there. When people say this film hasn't got a lot going for it, it was very slow and pondering. Watching it the other day made me remember just how visceral at times this film is, because when they do go violent or action packed, they go fairly all in, I think, mate.
Yeah, and you spoke about the scene with when the driver corners Cook in in the strip club. Like, he's in a room full of naked women, but you don't notice that. Your eyes are focused on the driver with Cook, and he's got the hammer. And you were just waiting for this guy to cave his skull in. Because he's got to come and he's threatened the lives of the driver himself, where they screwed him over with a job. He's threatened the life of Benicio, the child of the woman he loves, and the woman he loves. This guy has every right to bash this guy's skull in at this point, and he doesn't. Instead, he tries to call Nino and get rid of all of this. He doesn't want any part of it. He wants Irene, Benicio, and himself away from it. He just wants to live a happy life. And there's one scene in particular that reminds me of is Irene, Benicio, and the driver are sitting in her apartment. And the driver is watching cartoons with Benicio.
Yep.
And he says, is he a bad guy? And it's a shark on the TV. And he said, yeah, he's a shark. Of course he's a bad guy. And the driver said, well, there's no good sharks? And Benicio says, no, he's a shark. And the next shot you see of the driver, he has like a sad look on his face. Because that's who he is. He's the shark, and he doesn't want to be the shark. That's why I think like the song, A Real Hero, A Real Human Being, is so powerful in this movie, because that's who he wants to be. He wants to be a human being. He doesn't want to be a shark. And he wants to be the hero. He wants to look out for Irene and Benicio. And that's what he does at the end of the movie. Like, he protects them. He makes the deal with Bernie to leave Irene alone. Like, and it could cost him his life, and I think he expects to lose his life. But he doesn't. Like, fortunately, he doesn't. And it's little moments like that. Like, Gosling, during interviews for this movie, he said that he treated this role kind of like a superhero role, whereas putting on the jacket was like putting on his cape.
What a cool cape as well, mate.
Yeah, and you do feel that with him, because once he meets Irene, anytime he puts on the jacket afterwards, is to protect her and her child.
Because he's not wearing it for the whole film, and sometimes it's slung over his shoulder as well, so they show that a bit. He's not always wearing it. Yeah,
and, I think that, again, it just all adds back to the music. It all goes back to the music. He wants to be a hero. Gosling treated this as if he was a hero. And then
he's wearing a mask at the end of the film, isn't he?
Yeah, he wears a mask at the end of the film when he goes to take out Nino. So I think it all adds to it. Like, that's what I mean. It feels like such a personal project between Gosling and Refn, and it's just the perfect. It's the perfect film of the two of them, because they followed this up with Only God Forgives, and though I enjoyed the movie, it is not on the caliber of this film.
Nicolas Winding Refn enjoyed it, didn't he? That's what I said about Billy Friedkin. They had that director's conversation. Billy Friedkin, one of my favourite directors. Winding Refn's like, he's come down and says, I think, Only God Forgives is a masterpiece. And Friedkin tears him a new one. It's like, can somebody get this? Is there a medic in the house? Because I think this guy's banged his head thinking that's a masterpiece. And I spoke about this with Ant, and there's nothing wrong with, love. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your work and putting it up on a pedestal, but let other people tell you it's a masterpiece. Surely that's how it goes. Let Billy Friedkin sit there and say, okay, the film's only been out for a few years, but it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I feel like Refn let the critical acclaim of Drive really go to his head, and the cult classic that this film became. That when he did Only God Forgives, he just thought, yeah, I created another masterpiece. And honestly, I think
do anything kind of felt immortal at that point, I think.
Yeah, and I think everything he did before Drive and after Drive, it doesn't compare to this movie. Nothing he has done is as good as this movie. Gosling, on the other hand, he always makes good films, and obviously La La Land is fantastic. Like, I adore that movie. But when I think of Gosling, this is the film I think of. I think this is his best performance, and I love majority of Gosling's movies. But yeah, I think they created something special here, and I think it's magic Refn has tried to recreate, but has never managed to.
No, I'm interested to see what he does next, because before this he did Bronson, which I like that with what's his name? I say Tom Holland, Tom Hardy in. If anybody hasn't seen that, check it out. And he did Valhalla Rising, which is fine. Then he did this, but they did Neon Demon 5 years ago, and that was just I wasn't a fan of that film. A lot of people tell me I'm wrong. Again, it's stylish, it's beautiful, it's weird, it's bizarre. Didn't work for me. Great lead performance, but this wasn't for me necessarily. But he was the full whack on it, wrote, directed, and produced it, which he'd only ever done on one film before. So I mean, but I'm saying that he hadn't done a film for 5 years.
Yeah, he did a TV show instead, didn't he? I think it's called Too Old to Die Young with Miles Teller.
Die Young, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to see what he does next. I mean, there's a few directors who I really have I'm really interested. In recent years, Jordan Peele. I liked his films. I'd want to see what he does next. The geezer, Ari Aster, interested to see what he does next. The kind of event type films. But Nicolas Winding Refn is the odd one because, like you say, there's nothing wrong with Only God Forgives. It's all right. It's good. The Neon Demon, I wasn't a fan of, but critically did well. So, but he hasn't done it for 5 years. Now I want to see what he comes back with next. It's been a long time.
I think his next movie is called Maniac Cop.
Maniac.
It's set in the streets of LA. It's from the writer who wrote Captain America and the Winter Soldier, which I know you're not a big fan of the superhero movies. I think you kind of agree with the roller coaster analogy, right? Where it's fun and it's enjoyable, but you don't think about it afterwards.
Yeah, once I'm off the roller coaster, I feel a bit giddy, and then I'm done with it. I'll move on to the next one. But Maniac Cop was an old 80s film, I think.
Yeah, this is the plot for Maniac Cop. Is there a monster on the loose on the streets of Los Angeles, or is it just a killer cop out to punish the city that destroyed him? Yeah, it's very brief, but I'm looking at the little poster they've made, and it's bathed in neon and full of color. It's the typical Refn trope now, I think, at this point.
It's going to be a TV series. It's an HBO series. That's going to be.
Is it?
Yeah, I've just read it. It is a reimagining of that old film, and that film was mental. It's like the 80s. It's a horror film from the 80s with Bruce Campbell in it, which says an awful lot about it. But it's a killer cop who should be dead, basically. So that should be. I mean, I don't how. I mean, that film was all right, but that's a really strange for him to take on. I think that's completely out of his. Well, for me, it's not completely, but it's a step out of his wheelhouse. But then I appreciate when directors do try something different. But it's an HBO series, apparently.
Yeah, and maybe that's where Refn wants to go now with his projects is TV. Because if the last one he did was Too Old to Die Young, and now he's doing Maniac Cop, maybe that's where he wants to be for a few years. Is to find his love in TV, and maybe he'll come back to film and make something incredible again. Because honestly, I think the last few films haven't worked. And
maybe it's a longer form storytelling. Maybe he feels that his particular vision and way of telling a story needs to be seen over 8, 10, 15, 19 episodes, maybe.
Maybe, but like Drive is a very short film. Mm-hmm. It's only
based on a book, though, isn't it?
It's based on a short book, but they did change quite a few things, and there is a second book called Driven. But
I've looked into. I haven't read it, but since you mentioned it a few weeks ago, I've been looking into it.
Well, yeah, it tells you the fate of the driver, what happens to him after the events of Drive, and yeah, it's really interesting. I've not read it myself. I've read like little notes here and there of it, but yeah, I think Refn's career has taken such a different turn to where I thought it would after this movie. Whereas Gosling, he's seemingly going from strength to strength. Like on his plate, he's got The Wolfman, which he's directly involved with Lee Wanell, and The Grey Man, which is his answer to John Wick and the Bourne series with the Russo brothers. But yeah, like I'm really interested to see where his career goes.
I mean, I would like to see him do a film again because there is something about his films which splits people down the middle. Like critically, like I mentioned, The Neon Demon. Lots of people really, really like that. I was braced for when I watched it. It was going to be this kind of like cult masterpiece, but it wasn't for me. But a lot of people really did like it. So I like a director who takes risks within his work. So I do want to see him come back and do something. But again, if he wants to go into TV, that's where he feels the wheelhouse is. And I've said before on other shows that TV or streaming series and films now, the difference is minimal. Now, like budget is the only real difference, but it depends on what you're working on. Do you know what I mean? Even like a 10 million budget, 15 million budget per episode in a TV series is unheard of. But nowadays, it's getting more and more like the norm. Film stars aren't film stars anymore. and TV stars aren't just TV stars. There's much more cross-pollination between the two now. So the quality has obviously risen. And I think Refn's obviously realised that. And he's like, well, I can tell my story I can really develop my story into a longer format here. Plus, I don't have to skimp necessarily on the talent or even the budget, because his films aren't big budget anyway, to be fair. So it's pretty much working with the same budget, but he's just able to stretch it out a bit more. But I would like to see what he does next. And yeah, Gosling goes from strength to strength. Carey Mulligan, she's already a Academy Award nominee anyway, and it looks like potentially in 2021 she will be up for Best Actress. If she isn't, then I have no idea what's going on in the Academy's mind. But could even win it. I mean, she's doing okay in the run up to the bigger in the award season run up. She's winning some awards, so she's in the race for sure. But looking back, it's a great cast to put together. Like Oscar Isaac, who would later star with Carey Mulligan in Inside Llewyn Davis. Oscar Isaac, Albert Brooks, Carey Mulligan, Ryan Gosling, Ron Perlman. It's a really Christine Hendricks, Bryan Cranston. How could I forget him? It's a quality cast up top, mate. And even looking back now, like while some of the actors were doing great then, they're doing even better now.
Yeah.
So looking back, I mean, it's a hell of a cast to assemble.
Yeah, and going back to the score a little bit, there is a different version of this movie that came out 3 years after that. Because I kind of want to get to this, because I want to hear your thoughts on this. It came out in 2014. There was a BBC One rescore for some reason. I don't know why this happened, and I hate that it did, because
Zane Lowe, wasn't it?
It was Zane Lowe, who I do like. I like Zane Lowe, but this was... it's not the same movie. We talked earlier on how important the soundtrack is to this film, and how big of a part music plays, not just in the movie, but how this film came together. So why change it, and why allow BBC to take a run at it? I don't know, because that rescore was dreadful.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. Look, art can be. There's no restriction on art. Anyone can take some. Look at YouTube nowadays. You can go on YouTube and people chop and change films, or they take scenes and add their own music. And hey, sometimes it's a lot of fun. Sometimes it doesn't work. But nothing is sacred in film or art. But there's got to be a reason to do this. So the fact that Zane Lowe decided to do this, fine, whatever. Okay, maybe don't release it on the BBC and have it played nationally, but. What? Yeah, you'd have to kind of ask yourself why. There's always got to be a reason why. And I get that he thought it would probably be an interesting idea. Again, I'm here to say that. Fair dues. If you think that, great. Give it a shot. But fuck, it was awful, wasn't it? It changes the film completely. It really does. And that's the problem. When it changes something, it's fine. But it doesn't add anything to it. I mean, like, Bastille. What's going on with Bastille being in the moment when Shannon gets killed in that? It's like, yeah, no, it just doesn't work. I mean, I like some of the artists. I mean, Banks. I really like Banks. I think she's great. Churches are fine, but it just. I mean, the opening isn't so bad actually. I think it's Prida. That's fine. That's a bit of synth. It's fine. It kind of, it works well alongside the scene. No, with what we already know it was originally. But then on, it just gets again. Not all of it is like a car crash in terms of the choices. But when the original just works, when the scenes work so well because of the score, and the score works so well because of the scenes, to take one of the other out, it changes the dynamic too much, and the film lost an awful lot because of that.
Yeah,
and fair dues for trying something new, but it just didn't work in this instance for me anyway. And you,
yeah, and one of the first questions you asked me on this was, "What's the moment that you think of when you think of this movie?" And it was the driver with Irene and Benicio driving, in Los Angeles with the sun blazing on them, with a real hero playing. The version in this rescore is the 1975 is playing, and it's just not the same. Every time I watch the original scene, I get goosebumps and my hairs stand up because it's such a beautiful scene. But when they've replaced it with the 1975, it just doesn't have the same impact. Like this. This movie is not the same. I was shocked to see that it's on Amazon Prime. You can still watch this thing now. This thing should be burned in a dumpster somewhere. Like, nobody should have copies of these.
Bespin ain't happy.
Oh, no, it's terrible. It's this, like I said, this is probably my favorite movie of all time, or one of. And that just butchered it. Like, maybe this is how, like, some, old school Star Wars fans feel about the special editions. because it was just not a good move. I can't believe the studio approved it. I can't believe Refn approved it. Like, what was going on?
I mean, I can. But Refn's an artist. He again, he might come across as a bit pretentious and a bit of a doofus, but at heart, he's an artist, and he probably just thought, it was like, yeah, go on, see what can you do with it? See what you can do. What can you make of this? And I don't know what you thought about it. I don't know if you do or not, but I mean, props to the guy for being like, yeah, go for it. But because again, yeah, art is art. People can do what they want of it, and they're going to do what they want of it, but doesn't always mean it works. And no, I didn't think it worked either. It looks like the majority of people didn't either. But I just want to know what the reasoning was, other than because it wasn't even a contemporary upgrade. Because those songs in the soundtrack, the original, aren't old songs. They're of their time. You know, they're released in and around that time. Yeah. So it's not like we're getting the 10-year anniversary of Drive. A load of new synthwave artists, or even as contemporary artists, are trying to put their own stamp on it. It's like, I say, like 2-3 years later. Yeah. It's like, I mean, either the film's held in such high esteem that they thought, wow, this is a masterpiece, Refn. Let's see what we can do with it. Or Zane Lowe just was going a bit mental. If they did it now, I still think it was a bit odd. But you got that separation and distance of time. But it's a really weird decision, isn't it, mate?
It's a terrible decision. Like, it's 10 years now since Drive. And if they wanted to do it on the 10th anniversary, I would understand it. I wouldn't enjoy it because I still think it's bad, but I'd get it. But to do it 3 years after the film came out was just a really weird choice. And it just shows just how instrumental, no pun intended, the score of the movie is. And even the original, before Drive released, there was a version of it that leaked online. And it had the Social Network score.
Yeah.
And again, like, it's not as bad as the rescore, but it's not the special movie that I love. It's not Drive to me.
You've always got to ask yourself why, and that's a question I ask about a lot of things. Same when we're talking about Star Wars speculation, when we're talking about the Mando and that. The question is why. A lot of them is why would this character be there? Why do they want to do it? Same as this, and again, same with George Lucas and the special editions. But you could ask the same of any moment in any film. But the question is why. Why do you rescore it? I mean, and again, I've said it before, and that's where I'm kind of sitting on that. Look, people can do what they want. If they want to put their own spin on it, great. Zane Lowe wasn't ever coming out, as far as I'm aware, saying this is the definitive version.
No.
It's just an idea that he had in his head. But it's got to kind of like, other than like a quirky side project, the question would be why? Because it's the two are so synonymous, the score and the film are so synonymous with each other. It would almost be like taking away the opening fanfare from A New Hope. I know we're referencing Star Wars. Sorry if you don't like those films, but it would be like changing that for something else and then releasing it on BBC and seeing what people thought about it. It'd be like, why? It's again, that's obviously another level, that fanfare to that film and Drive to score. But to film fans, they know. You know what I mean? They know that this score and that film go so well together. But I don't know why. I want to hear a Bespin. I want to hear a Bespin redux of this film. I want to see what film songs you'd come up for this.
I'll just use the song from Godzilla vs. Kong. Yeah, come on.
Yes, mates. Well, I don't know what I'd use. I'll have a think about something. That's an interesting for anyone listening out there. Send us what the songs which you would, if you had to, and I'm sure somebody will say, "Well, I'll just use the original soundtrack."
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you?
Hear like contemporary songs which could work in the new one.
I think maybe you'd go even further back. I think maybe you go like I said. I think it was REO Speedwagon is like the artist that played, which Gosling and Refn sang along to in their car. So I think maybe go back to the 80s if you're going to rescore it. Get some music from that time, because there's like I said, synth pop is a massive part of this soundtrack, and there's a lot of synth pop back in the 80s. So maybe that's the way to go. But yeah, I don't think this film ever needs to go through that again. I have had nightmares of that Zane Lowe rescore, and I kid you not, I have dreamt about it. I'm woken up thinking, why, But yeah, I want to talk about the final shot of this movie.
I was going to say, actually, it's funny that, because I was going to say we can't, not that we're wrapping up just yet, but we haven't mentioned with the final shot, but even like the final sequence when Driver goes to meet Bernie, and it is like the standoff at dawn. It's like the old western where like the two gunmen are face to face, like the last men standing are face to face, and one's gonna fall, but who's it gonna be? And yeah, man, as an ending to this film, I mean, you said the film's pretty much perfect, but as an ending, like the sequence and the end shot, I mean, I'm guessing it works for you.
Yeah, I find the final shot of the movie so tense, where you're just lingering on Gosling's beautiful face for what feels like forever. He's not blinking. There's no movement. This is after he's just been stabbed by Bernie, and he's taken Bernie out the same way he stabbed him, and he's out for the count.
And he had a knife ready, driving it. He had that knife ready to stab him in the neck.
Oh yeah, he knew what was coming. From the moment he sat down in that restaurant, he knew full well this could be the end. This guy is going to try and end my life, and he was willing to take that risk again for what seemingly is the love of his life. But yeah, like that shot is so intense and just your heart races. Like you don't want him. He can't survive in a world like this, and he will be looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life. But you want him to live. You want him to survive. And when you start hearing a real hero play in the background, it gives you that bit of hope. Like, is he alive, or is this just the song they played as he's gone?
It's like final theme playing out.
Yeah. And it's just a blink, and he moves his hand, he starts the car, and he drives off. Irene goes to his door, knocks on his door, he's not there, he's gone. You watch him drive off into the night whilst a real hero plays. She is safe, he's alive, he's leaving Los Angeles behind. End of the movie. And that's the perfect end to this film.
There's no end per se, is there? Because like you say, Irene knocks on his door, but he's not there. Like, what's she knocking for? I mean, what is it she's gone to say? Is it to reconcile? Is it to like try and escape with him, or is it to tell him like this is it, it's over, don't come near me? Do you know what I mean? What was she going to say? Driver's left the money there. He's not interested in the money. I'd like to think that he took a couple of wads, but he's an honest kind of geezer. And the music, like a real human. He's a real human being. He's a real hero, and that is what he is. And I guess the acts of violence throughout the film are shown because he's trying to protect somebody he loves. We mentioned, is he actually a sociopath? Maybe he is. But at the beginning of the film, he even says that you've got 5 minutes, I don't do anything, I drive. That's all I do. I'm not getting involved I'm not getting involved in anything else. I just drive. And then, but when it called for it, he got his hands dirty simply to protect those who loved, a child and a woman that he loved. It wasn't like he was just a nutcase running around slaughtering people. No. So you almost sympathise, or when he is kicking these people's heads in or choking people with a bullet, yes, it's gratuitous, and yes, it's like unquestionably bad, but he's doing it, and this is going to sound awful, but I'm hoping you know what I mean, but he's doing it for the right reasons. As an audience member, we know why he's doing it, which also makes when the moment when he and Irene have that look when she's like, oh man, this is too... he knows he's gone too far as well in the elevator. That makes it even more powerful because he's doing it for her, but in doing that, he's got to do awful things. So when the final song's playing, that, I'm the real hero, sorry, he does, because we're still rooting for him. He's gone through all of this. He's taken down the mob by himself for love, knowing he's not going to get anything out of it, knowing that he's the one, like Batman, he's got the one who's got to go into the dark night now and be chased. Not anybody else, him. But he did it anyway. And he's ridden off into the sunset. And he is a hero, I think.
I think he is too. And like I said earlier on, that's how Gosling approached this movie. He was like a superhero. And his little scorpion jacket was escape. And I think, by the end of this film, he is a hero. He saved the woman he loves. He saved Benicio. That's his story. And it's just a perfect ending to this movie. I like to believe that Irene knocked on his door for love. I like to believe that she went there to reconcile with him, because she has such a look of worry on her face that she wants to see him. She wants to make sure he's okay. And he's been protecting this family throughout the course of this movie. And again, that scene was only to protect when he caves the guy's head in. Like that is to protect not just himself, but to protect Irene, because they did say that they would come for Irene and the kid, which is part of the deal that the driver makes with Bernie, is you leave you leave them alone.
Any dreams, plans, hopes for your future, you'll have to put on hold.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I can't do Brooks and I can't do Alfred Brooks, or Bernie. But when he says that, it's just like, God damn,
Yeah,
that's it.
and we see throughout the movie that, like, even without the chance of being with Irene, like, it's obviously the two want each other. Once Standard's out of prison, they still long for one another. But he's willing to help save her life and Benicio's life and even Standard's life, for nothing. He doesn't want any payment. He just wants to make sure they are safe because he loves them. And I think that's a testament to his character. And yeah, he is a hero. I think, like, again, the music is so important to this movie, and that theme encapsulates the driver so well.
I want to listen to it now, mate. It's also the actual score itself, because I mean the soundtrack songs are great. I mean they are incredible. The song, and they're, like you say, they're kind of like that the holy trio: Kavinsky with Nightcall, Under Your Spell, Desire, and A Real Hero, Electric Youth College. They are the holy trinity of this film. But then what Cliff Martinez does with the score, though, it's just as important as well. Like just a scene of Driver just staring, accompanied by that music, or with the hammer, or on the beach. I mean, that shot, the moment on the beach with Nino when he rams his car, the wicked shot of Driver standing on top of the hill, sandy hill, with that mask on, and there's this wicked shot of him walking across the sand to Nino, and of course he's got that mask on, he covers his entire face and hair. It's such a brilliantly lit shot where suddenly the shoe's on the other foot now. You've got Nino, who out through the whole film has been this big, badass, intimidating nutter. and Driver's kind of been, like you mentioned at times, he's kind of like almost like childlike almost. And when Christina Hendricks' character gets her head blown off, like I say, he's like a rabbit in the headlights. But in this scene, Nino's on the beach like cowering, and Driver's walking down the middle of the beach like an absolute boss, with the music going, and it's just the way it's lit, the composition of that shot is great. The shoes on the other foot now, to the point where Nino would rather drown himself than face this badass.
Yeah, and obviously this is a film, but this feels like it's out of another film. And obviously he's wearing a mask from the movie he's working on. He's got his little jacket on. The music that's playing is so different from the synth pop music that is, that Desire or Kavinsky plays in this movie.
Yep.
And it just like, I almost feel as if the driver is putting on a performance for this. Because the way that Nino dies, it's on a beach, it's in the water, you've got the lighthouse lights flashing by every now and again. It feels like it feels as if the driver is playing a part in another movie, his own movie.
Almost.
Yeah, it feels like he's his own film. And in this, again, he's the hero. He's killing the bad guy. So that's how I feel about that scene. But like you said, it's so well shot. And again, the cinematography in this movie is beautiful. So well done. But yeah, Cliff Martinez with the score. Incredible. Even like the opening sequence, what we talked about earlier. The theme is so subtle there, but it's so tense and it keeps you on edge. You listen, you're going between the ticking of that music.
Yes.
To the radio. Watching the police follow Gosling around. It just all adds to it. Everything with the score, the soundtrack is perfectly crafted to this movie. It's unreal how well it all fits.
Yep. You can make a car chase exciting, but it's something else to make a car chase tense.
Yeah.
And they got it. Because, again, you've got like Bullet with Steve McQueen, great car chases. The French Connection, the best car chase in cinema. Great. All done in the daylight as well. Brilliantly done, guerrilla style. But you've got to make it tense. You've got to make the way they shot the French Connection one, again, was very similar, very tight camera work. And here is extremely tight on Gosling the whole time. Like you feel like you're sitting next to him, like staring up at him. And the way they use, like you say, the radio, the helicopter, the police radio as well, everything just works so well. And it is a hard thing to do, because there are other films that have got great car chases in, but they feel hollow. They feel a bit empty. They do feel like smash bang wallop and speed, and you're not really invested in the characters, or the stakes aren't really there. But to start the film off like this, mate, it's a wicked way to start. The way the score pumped in, this is setting the tone. Like you mentioned, the cinematography of the opening scene sets the tone. We get to find out what Driver's all about and what his line of work is. And even then, straight away after that, they show him as a stunt driver. No, they don't need much exposition. We just find out he's a stunt driver, and that's it. It's all we need to know. But I like some of the names of this score, like Rubber Head. They broke his pelvis. Kick your teeth. Hammer. Skull crushing. So Cliff Martinez is quite literal with his names, and I forgot about that scene as well when that geezer in the bar comes up to Driver and he's like, "Hey, long time no see. I've got a job for you."
Shut your fucking mouth.
Like, why don't you just turn around before I kick your teeth down your throat? And again, you've the way I said that was probably the least menacing anyone's ever said it. You've got to sell those scenes. You've got to sound intimidating, especially because we hadn't really seen Driver lash out before.
Yeah, and he's lashing out there because this is following the scene where Irene tells him Standard's getting released. And even in that shot where she tells him that, you see they're parked at a red light, and you see the red light over his face after she's told him. He's so angry in the scene, but you don't see it because he's keeping it aside. But he lets that out on this guy who he did a job for before.
That's it.
I'll kick your fucking teeth out. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's just, again, it all goes down to Gosling's performance.
Yeah,
he doesn't say much in this movie, but when he does, like, it always leaves an impact.
Yeah, he's great at that kind of emotive performance. And again, and I know, again, to credit the other people, a lot of people say, well, they don't like that. They find it bland, they find it boring, they don't like his emotionless acting, but it isn't. That's what I say back in even First Man. I have issues with that film. I am going to rewatch it though. I thought he was great in that because you don't always need to be. Certain performances don't need to be big and bombastic. I mean, Driver could have been. We could have said more in this film, but would it have made it better? No. Don't know. Probably. Well, no, it wouldn't.
I don't think so.
Even if the dialogue had been great, that would have been a bonus. But it works because like those little moments work because we're introduced to Driver. We don't know much about him, and then when he finally does kind of snap to this guy, we're like, bloody hell, where'd that come from?
Yeah, and I think like he's just a weird guy in general, the Driver. In one of the first scenes with Irene, she says, "Would you like a glass of water?" And he doesn't say yes, please, or no, thank you. He says, "Okay." Like, who says that? Like, you don't. That's what I mean. He's quite childlike in some of his ways. Like, even they just sit by a windowsill and just keep smiling at each other. Like, he doesn't know what to say. Like, he's a giddy little schoolboy. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you don't get that from somebody who's not a quality actor. Like Ryan Gosling.
Or words as well. You don't get that from words. And how many film romances have been stilted from a lack of chemistry or from poor dialogue when sometimes all you need is a word. Hey, look, here's Star Wars again. The prequels, dialogue, crap. The best moment between Anakin and Padme was that the wordless scene when they're both looking from the Jedi Temple and Padme's in her pad and they're looking across the sky and it's like, yeah, that's it. That's it. The wordless, like silent emotion performance is wonderful. Whereas here, the whole and I don't mean to compare the two. Don't at me. But here, the film it works because of that. You don't need words. Like I said up top, you don't need words to see what these two feel like. You don't need words to see that Driver wants normality and he knows Irene could be the key to this.
Yeah.
And then when Standard comes in and changes the dynamic somewhat, he changes as well. And he realises that, okay, maybe those beautiful moments we had at the beginning may not be what I'm going to get. It's just great. It's, yeah, I mean, you could put anyone else in a role and it could be good. But sometimes for me, and again, hindsight's wonderful, but for me, everything in this film came together to create something really good. And you mentioned Driven, and Refn said, I ain't making a sequel to this. Gosling famously doesn't do sequels, but can you imagine a world where we get a sequel to this film?
No, absolutely not. And I don't want one. And I think fans of this movie don't want one. As we said, the ending to this movie is the perfect ending. Anything else will ruin this. This is a perfect piece of cinema on its own. It doesn't need to be a franchise. It doesn't need a follow-up. You can read the book if you want to know more about, the character of the Driver. But don't touch it. Leave this alone. This is, in my opinion, a modern masterpiece.
Yep, well, there you go. I mean, even though, like you say, the book in itself, the film has changed certain aspects of the book by it's James Salas's novel. So if you do go read Driven, kind of keep in mind that even that's not even intended as a follow up to this film. It's intended to follow up to the book, which this film is based on, but changed a lot of the aspects of it. And Hossein Amini wrote this film, who was down to do the Kenobi series, but has since gone, which is interesting. But yeah, there is a sequel out there of the book, but I guess if you really want to tie it into your headcanon, you can do. But yeah, I can't see a world where you need a sequel to Drive. What are they going to Drive Faster? We're going to call it something like that.
It would probably be called Driven, I'd assume.
It just doesn't need, like 7 years later, I think the book is, but
yeah, it is.
You just don't need it because it's not. You are trying to catch lightning in a bottle because you need Gosling to go back into the headspace he was in 2011 to tap in the role. You'd need to find. Obviously, I'm not going to give any spoilers for the book, but you'd need to find characters and actors who could fit their roles so perfectly as well as they did in this film. And you'd have to. And again, it's the why. Why? I mean, also 10 years has passed. I know that didn't stop things like The Incredibles and that, but why would you need a sequel? And thankfully, there are no, as far as I'm aware, certainly not for years. There's, talk has been shelved of any kind of sequel, but it comes down to the big word of why. If you had to think of a reason why, what could you even think of one?
Why did it have to be one?
If there was going to be a sequel, if someone said to you, "We're making it," could you think of anything to justify it?
If the film was rebooted, that's the only way I can see it happening. Is if down the line somebody decides to reboot Drive and make it a franchise. That's the only way I can see you get more than this singular Drive movie. That is something I don't want to happen. Like I said, they've caught lightning in a bottle with this movie. And with the drive towards franchises in this day and age, I would hate to see what becomes of Drive, in that world. Yeah, exactly. Don't touch it, please. If anybody from any studio is listening, just please don't ever touch it.
Yeah, please just don't. If Ryan Gosling, if you're listening, I love you, man, but don't touch it. Don't come back to this. Right, well, that's the film. Is there anything that you didn't like? Or that's the wrong way to put it. Is there anything which you thought, well, that wasn't as good as the rest, it wasn't quite up to the standard?
Honestly, no. I know it's a very boring answer, to say no. But again, I do consider this probably my favorite movie of all time, if not one of. And yeah, I loved everything about this movie, even after watching it every year for the past 8 years or 9 years. Yeah, no, this movie is still perfect to me. This for me is a masterpiece. This is something I will always put on. It's something I try and show people all the time, just so they can appreciate it. And yeah, no, standard maybe. I didn't think his character was as good or as fleshed out as the rest of them, but again, he's only there to be a foil in the relationship between Irene and the driver. So yeah, I don't know. He just adds to the plot, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But no, I think I've got no real complaints about this movie. I know it's a boring answer, Matt, but I haven't got one.
No, you'd be surprised how many people say that, but that's part of the reason of retrospectives. But sometimes you get somebody say, well, yeah, this wasn't great, but most of the time it's not. And no, I'm with you, mate. This is a film of could have beens. Like I mentioned, Ron Perlman could have been too big, but he wasn't, because we got those humanising scenes in the diner, and at the end, obviously, when he finally gets drowned, he isn't going out like a monologue spitting villain. He's going out like a punk. Yeah, that's really about it. Albert Brooks could have been, he could have misstepped, but he didn't. He doesn't do that, does he? He's Nemo's dad. Ryan Gosling could have been, he could have undersold the role, but he didn't. And I know these are very kind of well, what's the point of mentioning them? But it's the fine lines so much for me. It's the fine lines where I see people saying that they don't connect because they can't connect with the driver. I can see that on first viewing, fine, I get that. But there's so much going on within this film that it's like a deck of cards that if one component doesn't work, it's nowhere near as effective. But thankfully, nothing fell down, and it is a fantastically written, fantastically acted, produced, made film, and I can't really think of anything wrong with it whatsoever, other than, I don't know, nothing other than I can't find the original jacket online. I have to pay £50 for a knockoff. That's it. And honestly, that's true. Anyone out there, if you do like this film and you've got flaws, let us know, because it might be like, oh yeah, I see where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
What about the scene where he puts at the end when he puts the stuntman's head on and then goes to look through the window of the pizzeria?
I love that. I love the music in that scene.
I've got nothing against it, but I can see that people being like, what's all that about?
Yeah, again, I think we talked about the mask, and I think that is him assuming a role. He is, when he goes to kill Nino, he's playing a different guy. He's not the driver at this point. He's somebody else. And yeah, I think he's just a guy who stars in the movies and has probably watched too many movies, and he's taken this as a like, it's not him doing this horrific act. It's the role he's playing.
Yep, fair enough, mate. I've got nothing against it. Well, when I did watch it the other day, I was like, I don't remember this scene where he just looks in as like gawps through the window, but that makes sense. I mean, I kind of assumed he was just scoping out, firstly making sure that Nino was there, but also just scoping out, any like not quite the competition, but what's he up against? And then really, of course, he wants Nino. He knows Nino's getting on it. Nino's knocking back a few bevies. He's not in prime condition.
Yeah,
he knows that. He's walked up to the pizzeria and seen it with his own eyes. Yeah,
Nino's had a good night. It's the perfect time to take him out. And yeah, like, to wear the mask and not to get noticed, because Nino does know who the driver is.
Yes.
It's ample opportunity. But even, like I said, like, even when he does kill Nino, he doesn't take off the mask. Like, at this point as well, Nino has never seen the Scorpion jacket. He's only ever seen the driver in a t-shirt working in the garage. So he doesn't know it's the driver under that mask. He can assume, but he doesn't know. The driver doesn't want him to see his face either. He wants him to see the bald Vin Diesel man, like, ending this guy's life. He is like the action hero from the movies he stars in.
Yep, that's fair enough, mate. There you go. There is the reason I wanted to hear. And he is a real hero. He's a real human being as well. Being. He's proven that as well. So I'm going to put on the soundtrack as soon as I press stop on this recording, because it's been going on in my head the whole time. And honestly, it's just what I mean. It's such a cool movie as well. The film is so fucking cool. It's just dripping with style. And they're not even just like, oh, these people look good and their clothes look great. I say just the visual style, the music, the font, the colours, the way that even the way the Refn, I say, captures everything in his like his signature wide shots, and then then the car chase is so stylistically done with the clothes. Oh mate, it's just one of the coolest films I've ever seen.
It's one of the coolest films. It has one of the best soundtracks and scores of all time, in my opinion. It's just, yeah, like you said, it's oozing with style. I think the font and the aesthetic of this movie has inspired so much following. It obviously has a cult following. It's a cult classic. And it's crazy to think this movie's 10 years old. Like, it's just, but it stands the test of time, and I think it will forever stand the test of time, because, like you said earlier on, everything happened with Gosling, with Refn, with the entire cast. It was lightning in a bottle. This movie can't be replicated. In my opinion, it's a perfect movie, and I encourage everybody to go and watch it. If they haven't, if you listen to this, you probably like enjoy Drive, but go and put it on again anyway, just because it's perfect. It's an amazing film.
Well, there you go. You've heard it here from Bespin Bulletin himself. And if anybody else has any more authority than him, well, I want to hear it. But there isn't anyone out there. So that is our Drive episode. I hope you enjoyed what you've just heard. And again, like I say, if you want to get in contact and to say that, listen, guys, you were spot on. Absolutely want to hear that. If you didn't agree with some of our points, or you thought we were talking rubbish, we'd like to hear that as well. Keep it polite. We're all film fans here. But Bespin, firstly, mate, thank you so much for coming on finally and getting this done.
Yeah, it was a long time coming, and I'm so glad it was Drive that we chose to do this for.
Yeah, and to be fair, we could have gone on for a long time, I think, as well, to be fair. We probably could have pushed this out for another couple of hours and gone into the nitty-gritty of it. But
the thing is, we could have gone on for another 2 hours just talking about how much we love Gosling and how beautiful he is, you know?
Oh, God, he's such a stud of a man. Like even like the Notebook, he's like, that's where obviously he's like swoon worthy in the Notebook, as he's in a lake with the swans and that, like, yeah, in the rain, like, yeah, he's a hunk.
Oh,
you got James Marsden in that film, but no, Gosling, he's the one I'm looking at.
Crazy Stupid Love when he takes his shirt off. Oh.
God, my God! I mean, I've got that on my wall. I mean, I'd like to, yeah. There's that. I mean, even when he's a bit like a bit more roughed up in some of his films, he looks great. The Nice Guys, when he's like a bumbling idiot. Obviously, La La Land in that polyester suit, it's wool. If you've heard the song, you know that.
Mm-hmm.
If he's going to be the Wolfman, I mean, God, he's going to be the sexiest wolf I've ever seen. But he backs it up though, mate. And I mentioned Brad Pitt. A lot of Brad Pitt's the pretty boy tags always followed Brad Pitt around. Brad Pitt's a phenomenally good actor.
Incredible.
He's a very good actor. And sometimes you can kind of I mean, Brad Pitt's never been a rom-com dude, really, but Matthew McConaughey's another one. He starred in some rom-coms. And even now, certain people still think of him as a rom-com guy. He's an award-winning fucking actor, and he's quality.
I hope Gosling
Ryan
is the Oscar one day.
Well, he's been nominated enough times, isn't he? So he picks probably not the Wolfman, but you never know. But he picks the right roles where he puts himself in contention. I mean, he could have won for. I could see why he didn't win for La La Land, but you know that film swept the board. So had he won that, I wouldn't have been surprised just because of how popular that film was. But I can't argue with the winner that year, Emma Stone. She was great in that film.
Yeah,
should have won Best Picture, but that's another story.
But
no, I think he will get one.
Yeah, the next few films he has coming up, I don't think he'll get it for the Wolfman. I don't think he'll get it for the Grey Man either. But maybe Project Hail Mary, which is going to be directed by Lord & Miller. And it seems like they're really banking on that project. I think that could be the next one to keep an eye on. And again, he's playing an astronaut in that movie. And obviously we've seen him recently in First Man. So maybe this is his second chance at going for that Oscar. Because I'm telling you, that First Man movie was his attempt at going for an Oscar, in my opinion. And it just didn't work.
Yeah, well, that film was before it came out. You know, the Claire Foy, Ryan Gosling, Damien Chazelle, everybody involved. It's a biopic of Neil Armstrong, Americana, and the Oscars love films about the States, and that everything was set up for them sweeping the board, and it just didn't. And I need to rewatch that film because we spoke about it the other day. I thought when it came out, reception was fairly lukewarm, but looking back now, it's fairly decent on the old tomato meter. But I said on Twitter the other day, the Justin Hurwitz score, which I like pretty much all of his songs, they didn't even get nominated. That damn thing should have won. I've been listening to that as well as the Drive soundtrack on repeat because it's just wonderful. It didn't get really nominated, but yeah, the First Man was, you know, it was a go, it was a grab at some Oscar love, and he'll get there because he picks the right roles and he's got the talent to back it up.
Yeah, he does. He absolutely deserves it. Absolutely.
Look at Gary Oldman as well, like a chameleon of an actor. How long did it take for Gary Oldman? And again, a lot of people say that The Darkest Hour shouldn't have been the one that won him the Oscar, but it took him so very long to win an Oscar when people were saying he should have had one years ago. Maybe he should have done. Same as Amy Adams. People are still banging the drum for Amy Adams to win, obviously. But with Amy Adams and with Ryan Gosling, you've got to be in the right role. You've got to be in. You can't just be given the Oscar because you've done well before. They've got to put themselves in contention.
Yeah, but
it's the actors who do.
You compared him to Brad Pitt, and to my recollection, Brad Pitt's only won one Oscar, right?
Yes, yeah.
And that was for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for supporting actor. Yeah, and that felt like a long time coming for Brad Pitt.
But he earned it in that role for me as well. It didn't feel like let's just give it to Brad Pitt because it will shut people up and he's been around for a long time, like the kind of lap of honour. He was great in that film. Yeah,
and it was the same thing with DiCaprio, right? Like I feel like DiCaprio, he should have had it before the Revenant. I probably would have given it to him for The Wolf of Wall Street.
Exactly. There's so many other films I would have given it other than The Revenant, but that's not to say that he didn't deserve it for The Revenant.
Yeah, and who's to say that, you know, with this Project Hail Mary film, that is Gosling's Oscar winner. Maybe,
yeah, and
like it's got the talent behind it, just as like First Man did. And yeah, I think we all thought First Man was going to be this big Oscar contender at the time.
It fell away, didn't it? But the thing about Gosling is, I think somebody like Ryan Gosling, for me, needs that Oscar for legitimacy, because with Ryan Gosling, to me, is one of the best working actors. He's my favourite working actor at the minute.
He's mine as well.
But I feel like he needs that Oscar in his mantle for the world to know that. And I know that sounds proper like film snobby and pretentious. Like we're in this innocent. We're the only ones who know. No, I don't mean that at all. But yeah, Ryan got again. A lot of people. When I think Ryan Gosling, a lot of people still think The Notebook because I've seen it online. I've seen it on Twitter and on Instagram, and or they see him as Crazy Stupid Love and things like that. It's like this. There's like I think he kind of needs that for the legitimacy in the wider circles. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm really misreading this. But to me, people say the same about Tom Hardy. That he'll get his Oscar one day. But Tom Hardy is universally seen as a great actor because he is, even though he puts on silly voices and masks. Ryan Gosling is a great actor, but I feel like he needs to be really recognised. He needs an Oscar, which is sad to have to say.
Yeah, I agree with you, and Gosling as well. He isn't this big movie star. He doesn't sell movies, does he? Like Tom Hardy can sell like Venom. Like he's gonna get like hundreds of millions from that movie and whatever. And Gosling doesn't do that. I think the age of the movie stars kind of disappeared now. Yeah. And I do believe that Gosling getting an Oscar will show people what he's made of. It'll put more respect on his name. And yeah, like you said, like people still think of The Notebook and Crazy Stupid Love. And yeah, like that's the ones I always hear all the time from people who aren't big film fans. They don't think of Drive. Yeah, they don't think of Drive. They don't think of The Place Beyond the Pines. Any of it. They just say, oh, he's the fella from The Notebook. Oh, he's from Crazy Stupid Love. Oh, he's in La La Land. Like, they don't know how diverse of an actor he is. Just how talented this man is. Mm-hmm. And like,
you're right, mate. And I'm sitting here agreeing with you, but I also want to shout again to Carey Mulligan because I don't feel like she's been given short shrift in this film. But with the praise she's getting now, and again, she's an Academy Award winning nominated actress anyway. But I mean, look how her career's gone up as well, and to potentially winning Best Actress with Promising Young Woman. She is also an extremely diverse actress who flies under the radar a bit, and there's been a bit of controversy this week about casting, which I think is absolute bollocks. But again, let's not forget she's London-born actress. She's flying the flag for Britain, so I'm supporting Carey for the actress this year, and she was actually fucking brilliant in that film.
Yeah, man. Like, I knew nothing about Promising Young Woman going into it, and I was texting you about like, what your thoughts were. And once I watched it, I was blown away. Carey Mulligan in that film was incredible. That film in general is incredible. And she's got my full support for Best Actress this year. She's got some stiff competition. I don't know if she'll get it, but I'm really, really hoping she does. If that film wins for nothing else other than Best Actress, I'll be happy. Obviously, it deserves a lot more. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of competition this year as well. Like, and I can see it not getting like Best Picture. But she deserves all the recognition she's getting.
No, absolutely. And again, her career's gone a similar way kind of to Gosling, where obviously since Drive she was in The Great Gatsby inside Llewellyn Davis, which is a great film. But then she's done things like Suffragette and Mudbound. Mudbound is excellent. Wildlife, which is another drama film, and Promising Young Woman. So she's kind of done these more dramatic roles as well, but on the like I say, less movie star. She's not a movie star. She's an actress, and she's a bloody good one. And she picks her roles carefully as well, to the point where Promising Young Woman almost felt like it was stepping out of that a bit. And look what she can do. So Carey Mulligan has shown that she can step into different roles as well, and is getting recognition as well. So the two leads in this film are either getting a recognition or have been getting it over an elongated amount of time now. And if Carey Mulligan wins this year, which I certainly hope she does, there's one check. Hopefully Ryan can get his in the future, and then we can go back and look at Drive and be like, look at these Academy Award winning leads in this film. Yeah,
exactly. And right now I'm looking at Drive. I'm looking at the picture of Drive that's in my background on my TV, and it's a picture of him, and I've got the pink lights bathed around him, and I'm just like, yes, that is my man. This man needs to win a goddamn Oscar already. Give it to him.
It'd be well deserved because the dude can act as well. So hopefully, fingers crossed, our boy Ryan gets it at some point. If they gave out Oscars for being hunky, him and Ant would be tied. He'd be up there.
Yeah, he would have won this years ago. He'd been sorted.
He would have won it before The Notebook came, when he was doing Disney stuff, probably.
Yeah, exactly. The Mickey Mouse Club.
Actually, whoops. But yeah, I think so. There you go. We've got a bit of Oscar talk out of us as well. But Bespin, was there anything else you wanted to say about Drive then before we wrap things up?
Just if you haven't seen it already, please go and give it a watch. At the moment, it's streaming on Prime Video, so you've got no excuse not to go and see it. And yeah, I'd love to hear if you have any disagreements with me and Matt, because like we basically think it's a perfect film, and yeah, I would just love to get another opinion on it. But yeah, that's it from me today. Please go and watch Drive if you haven't, or even go and listen to the soundtrack if it's been a while. Just everything around this film is stupendous, and yeah, I implore you all to go and watch it.
If you haven't seen it, sorry for spoiling it, but that's what happens in Drive. But yeah, I agree. Bespin said, hit him up. Where can the internet find you, mate, if they want to talk to you about Drive or anything?
So you can find me on the socials at Bespin Bulletin. You can also find me on Twitch under the same name. And yeah, we also have a podcast, Bob the Podcast, which is b.o.b. Which is the thing people forget. But you can just simply search Bespin Bulletin on podcast services and you can find us.
Yeah, go check it out. Highly entertaining with some hunky co-hosts as well. And yeah, go check it out. Star Wars leaks, which are very valid. The track record is fantastic. And a film fan in general as well. So go check it out. And everything you've just heard, if you want to debate, do it nicely because he's a nice man, as you just heard. If you want to find me, you know where you can find me. whatIwatchedtonight.co.uk. Follow What I Watched Tonight across all the socials and Letterboxd as well. If you do like what you've just heard, please consider leaving the back row a good review on your podcast provider of choice. 5 stars, of course, no less. And if you don't like what you've just heard, then just don't tell anyone. It's not worth your time. But Bespin, once again, thank you, mate, for coming on tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. It's been a long time coming.
And I'm right. And everybody listening, thank you for listening. And until next time from me, see ya.